She just warms my heart. This is my youngest. She's 7 months, and my kids really inspire me on in this work that I'm doing in terms of documenting history. It's for them. It's for the next generation, so we can pass the baton. Oh no, actually, that was a perfect time. No, you're ready. It's good. No, we can go. Yeah, I was about to click. Yep. So for today, so youth, like I said, they're an important part of not only just my specific body of work, but also it just in Black memory and storytelling, and making sure that that next generation is able to take this history and pass it on to their grandkids and their great grandkids. And I think that's really meaningful and important work that we're doing. Youth, they're a really important part of preserving the history I do, and also they've become my aesthetic in terms of how to capture media. So my background is a filmmaker first. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm also an educator. I've taught youth over, I would say, more than 15 years in various capacities, from K through 12, second grade, through, middle school math, to now higher ed. And what I find is that youth add a particular flavor to the work that they produce, and a particular style that I'll show you some examples, because it's hard to talk about it. I'll show you a snippet just to kind of explain where I'm coming from, and then I'll talk about it from there. The project that that's also gonna guide this discussion today is my most recent project, Mapping Blackness, which is a interactive digital archive of Black communities that's in a mobile app that's getting developed as we speak. So it's basically about putting these Black communities on the map. I've met with Dr. Pete, and you'll see a snippet, an image of her and her contribution to this project so far. But this is essentially a living archive that is user generated, where you can continue to add stories to help replicate some of the communities that are no longer in existence. We're using a lot of cool technology in terms of 3D recreation, mixed realities, and this is an intergenerational piece. And again, that story that's guiding this project is, what do you want the children to know, but also what do you want them to feel? And when I'm teaching my classes here at ASU, I teach a lot of filmmaking courses and documentary production. I'm always asking my students, what do you want people to feel after they see your work? So I want to show you just the framework also that helps me in terms of when I'm producing work. This is my board that's above my desk at work. So, or at home, actually, right above my desk. I put different cork boards up. Anytime I work on a new project, I take tons of note cards, and I take my Sharpies. I write down main thoughts and words that help guide my project. I put images up that help guide it. And for me, family is so essential. Family and community, and just certain keywords that help me remember what I want people to feel when they interact with this project that I'm working on, or with any of my work. So for my project here, Mapping Blackness, my goal is to put all Black towns on the map, our stories, our memories, our hopes, our dreams, our legacies, our heroes, our homes, our spaces, our families, our childhood, and our love. So those are things I'm trying to bring together in one space that you can interact with on a cell phone and on a computer. And then I have just images of my family, my grandparents, my sister, my cousin. They all had October birthdays. So we used to have like those joint family birthday parties. We had one cake, and we would celebrate every October. I have my brother, who's still my Superman, my superhero. I have my kids and nieces and nephews, my parents, aunts and uncles. So this sense of family is something I'm also trying to recreate in a digital realm in terms of how that corresponds to community as well. And then I want to zoom in to this bottom part. These are words. So as I'm working, as we're creating, and we're asking community members, what do you want the children to know about your communities? A lot of times what I've realized just from doing this process multiple times over the years is that there's a certain type of feeling that comes from asking people, what do you want the kids to know? And some of the feelings that participants in these projects have shared with me after they see the type of work that I've done is they feel a sense of joy, pride, strength. They feel liberated or affirmed, empowered, inspired. So these are words that also just guide my work as I'm moving forward. And then to go along with these words, I have my joy here. I have my husband. We have when our daughter was born, we have our oldest brother, Devin. And so these are, again, they keep me on the path of what do I want people to feel when they're interacting with this work. And I bring this up because just a few years back when, summer 2020, when the country was, in an uproar and going through everything that it was going through, I noticed that a lot of the streaming platforms had Black voices for like on Netflix and Amazon. They had different channels that show Black films. And one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of films, they weren't about joy. They weren't about liberation or affirming our histories. They were about oppression and lynchings and police brutality. And there were things that were traumatic and depressing, especially during the time when we were already going through so much. So in my mind, I'm like, how can I create something that also shows our history, but in a way that we're proud of, in a way that instills hope? And that's, again, that goes back to, what do you want children to know about our history, and how can we preserve it for them so that then they can pass it on? So this is my guiding force. And then I'll show you a snippet from, it's like a not really a trailer, but a teaser that shows you my current project, and it has a compilation of previous communities that I've documented, so you can see the type of work that I'm doing. Let's see. So hopefully this plays okay. I'll play just about like 2 minutes or so. Here we go.
When were you born, and why did you move here?
Well, I was born in Cortland, Alabama. I came here in 49, December 49.
Mapping Blackness is a digital archive that celebrates the heroes, communal spaces, and heart of historically Black communities. The project was created by Carla LynDale Bishop, who is a filmmaker and educator. Her goal is to bring communities together and promote social change. This project utilizes an intergenerational approach to storytelling. Mapping Blackness trains young people to interview elders in Black neighborhoods. Carla's process teaches them to research and shoot documentary interviews and to create interactive media. Most of the content in Mapping Blackness is produced by students, not professional filmmakers or technologists. The archive uses geotagging, augmented reality, 360 virtual reality, 3D images, and traditional documentary storytelling. Mapping Blackness teaches young people to create location-based stories that add images and videos to digital maps. This empowers young people to co-create authentic histories with the members of each Black community. In this respect, Carla views Mapping Blackness as a form of activism.
This man, my husband, Carl Gene Young Sr., he was and still is the love of my life.
My dad was J.W. Vat. He was one of the first Black businessmen in Denton.
This was initially a farmland that a gentleman had years ago. And he had some convictions concerning minorities. They wouldn't let them into this area. So this farmer donated all this acreage up here called the Heights, and he donated it to the people and helped build a church. That was Mount Olive Baptist Church. It was based upon a man having a heart, and it was based around religious freedom and religious liberty.
This digital archive will also invite audiences to virtually visit spaces that are no longer in existence. It will include 3D and VR renderings of such spaces. Audiences will be able to access these images and spaces via the website and/or mobile app. Community screenings are an integral part of the distribution and engagement strategy for this project. This project is influenced and inspired by the many Black elders who built their neighborhoods from almost nothing. Some of these communities are still thriving, while others are almost obsolete. Carla believes that it is vitally important to preserve their stories and their legacies. The history of small-town Black America is complicated and frankly still untold. Mapping Blackness is in a race to capture the history of these towns. Currently, the archive is in its prototyping phase.
So this video was made 2 years ago as part of a Pitch Black event hosted by Black Public Media. And it was a way for me to just talk about my project using previous work, which is going to be added to the map, while I'm now also reaching out to new communities and doing certain interviews, which I'll talk about in a moment. But there was definitely a big gap. So when this was made in 2021, 2 years later, it took a bit of a pause. And I'll even talk about that artistically as an artist, what that means and how that kind of has helped shape this project now in its new iteration. I'll show you a few updates as well. So that video, the footage that you saw was from communities in Northeast Ohio and also North Texas. And then the pandemic hit, things slowed down, everything came to a screeching halt. And I hit a wall as an artist where I was almost frozen, where I had a hard time trying to figure out where to move forward. It was amidst of homeschooling my kids, and I put fractions and ratios because those almost killed me trying to teach fractions to fourth graders. And then as we were coming out, and then as we thought we were like over the hump of the pandemic, new strands kept arising. So for a person who does community-based work, that really stopped me in my tracks and almost made me fearful to continue. I had that fear of spreading COVID to already vulnerable populations. I deal with a lot of elders in the Black community. So I was trying to figure out how can I continue this project without, interfacing with the people whose story I want to facilitate and tell. Also, along with that, there was just death all around us. Also, in the projects that I previously worked on, there were a lot of subjects or a lot of people who I grew close with who passed away during this process. So it was even more just a pause and a screeching halt for me. At the same time, I moved my family twice out of state from Texas to Oklahoma and now to Arizona. Started here at ASU, became pregnant. You saw my baby up front at the top, at the front of the slideshow. And then there's a moment this last summer where I saw a Top Gun, and for some reason, everything came together for me. So I'll talk about that. So let me discuss the impact of my work. So this last summer, like around June, I was trying to get out of my I don't know what it was, just a roadblock, a creative block, I would call it, just from just the weight of the world and just a lot of change and just, the state of things. I was trying to figure out how can I still do this work in a safe way where I'm not possibly spreading infection to communities, where we make sure we're filming in a safe way. I'm dealing with, working with youth and kids and college students and elders in close confined spaces with cameras and microphones. So I had to figure out what I could do. I had various people tell me, oh, you can do it via Zoom or just do phone calls and oral histories. And then they can just view everything on their phone, but something wasn't really clicking for me. I knew like this work, there has to be a part that it brings people together. And I think that's why I became a filmmaker, is in seeing how films can help bring people together. So during the screening of Top Gun Maverick, mind you, I've never saw the first one. I don't know what brought me that day to this theater, but even before the movie came on, just during the previews, for whatever reason, it could be the baby hormones, whatever, but I was crying. Like the people were sitting next to me, they were probably like, what is wrong with this woman? Tears coming down, like the snotty cry. I'm just like, something was really stirring in me in that moment. I'm like, what is this? And it hit me. A project I worked on in 2016, Voices of the Hill. It was a traditional feature-length documentary about a Black community in Northeast Ohio. And with that film, the community was really important, starring the Black community. I know when I was working on that film, I was like, I want to make all these everyday heroes superstars. I want to highlight the work that they do every day. I want to inspire other people, but it has to be that part where we're bringing people together. So I think when I was in that theater, I just had that sense like I have to do something where I can bring them together. Just on the phone isn't enough. Individual, viewing of this stuff isn't enough. There has to be that community component. And I went back to this quote, starring the Black community. If anyone is familiar with Melvin Van Peebles' work, his film, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, at the beginning of it, he says, starring the Black community. And that also goes back to this work. I want to make sure I'm highlighting these heroes. So instead of Tom Cruise, we have Mr. Curry, who was an integral part of my work and to this day still inspires me. Unfortunately, he passed away on the day that we moved to Arizona. And it was in the midst of that moving where I didn't even deal with it at that moment. So I think I have some residual, like backed up grief during the screening where I never mourned his death. And this is an individual who really rooted for my work. He would call me and tell me how proud he was of the projects I was doing. He was a person who at the beginning didn't even want to be involved in the documentary. And that goes back to community relations and building relationships, which we were talking about earlier. When I first asked him to be in the documentary, he didn't know me. He was like, where's your family from? What's your connection to the neighborhood? And he was definitely guarded. And so it took multiple meetings with him to explain to him what I was trying to do, how I wasn't trying to exploit their stories, but I just wanted to help preserve the history. It even took a little bit of stalking. I found out he played bingo at this church down the street. I would just pop up there and just kind of, just tell him more about what I was doing, not in a forceful way, just explain what I wanted to do. And then there was one day, there was a church picnic across the street and someone texted me and said, Mr. Curry's there. So I went there down to the church basement where he was. And again, I explained to him that what I was trying to do, and I knew I needed his buy-in because he was a leader in this particular community. So without him and without his trust, I know I couldn't move forward. But after that conversation, he took me out to his car, opened up his trunk and brought out boxes of photographs, newspapers, all types of history, and just handed me the box and was like, here you go. And he trusts me with these documents. And it was kind of scary. Like, I'm not an archivist, I'm a filmmaker, and keeping these precious documents that a lot of them were the only pieces of history that he had. They called him like the historian of this community. He trusts me to use these documents to help create this documentary. So I'll say that in a roundabout way, that pause that I took, it was necessary to get me to like a new, like renewed space with this work, and to remind me and to help me to remember that at the heart, this is community work that I'm doing, and that the Black community is a star. So I always keep that in mind. These are images from the screening that we did of that documentary. I brought out the red carpet. We had professional photographers, popcorn. We had a backdrop where families came dressed up. People who were in the documentary, they came out dressed in their best, getting photographs on the red carpet. We had posters up, and we celebrated that history. So that's also a huge part of this work that I'm doing. I want to always keep that centered and central to it, and using this as a tool to not only bring people together, but to facilitate discussions, to just enjoy and celebrate the love and the history that's a part of a lot of these historically Black communities. Another thing that came about this last summer is just reminding me that our history often goes, sometimes it's told, but it's not told from the right perspective. So the audio is really weird. When I played the last video, it's kind of out of sync. So I'm going to try this clip. If it doesn't work, I'll kind of just explain it. But this is Reverend Miles, who we interviewed for the documentary as well. And he's telling us how in his neighborhood, they had to fight to basically to stay in it, how the surrounding area was trying to take the land over for factories and for commercial businesses. And he talks about how they fought in relation to, and it is juxtaposed next to a newspaper article that was saying the opposite. So we'll try to play it. It's about a minute or so, and let's see how the audio goes. Yep. Thank you.
We call it the rock, which is, this place is nothing but a solid rock. And it's good for factory.
It's a little bit out of sync.
Like stamping plants and so forth like that. And they really wanted, the city wanted this place up here. So, but we had gathered Carlton Powell and Mr. Parker, myself, Jose John, and others. We had organized a group, and we had a meeting with them and told them no, they will not cooperate with them, because what they wanted, the hikes, because like I said, for the factories, and we were not giving it up, and we fought them for years and years.
In this newspaper article, it says the Heights didn't fight back, and you can clearly see that,
we call it the rock.
I don't know why I started over, sorry, but you can clearly see that they fought back, but it wasn't written in the local newspapers. It wasn't documented. So that's why this work is even more important, is that the limited history that's out there is not always correct or factual. So it's important to get it firsthand. And Reverend Miles showed us that there were discrepancies, and even there were other newspaper articles that showed that had descriptions about this community that weren't factual, that's calling the community apathetic or things like that, when they're really resilient and fought for everything that they had, from the paved sidewalks to city streets to running water. They fought for all of that. So that's also something that that I carry with me in this work as I move forward. The next thing that oops, I don't know why, there we go. So another piece of information that helps to focus me on this current project. So a couple years ago, I did an interactive documentary that was based with augmented reality. So essentially, you could take your cell phone and walk down the street, and a video will pop up of the church that used to be there, or the history of the church or whatnot. And we used this app that was called HP Reveal by Rasma, but it has since gone out of business. So we had all our images and videos on this app that decided one day before a presentation to just say, hey, we're no longer going to be around. And I'm like, what? So, and it worked, you know, it was decent. It was okay. It was image-based, location-based, and for AR, for augmented reality, basically just overlay the digital image. Think of like Pokemon Go, which is the inception for this idea, but I wanted to make it more based in history and Black communities. So when this was no longer working or whatnot, that's when I decided I just need to make my own app. Knowing nothing about that, you know, app development world. Again, I'm a filmmaker. You know, I make movies or whatnot, but it was a huge learning curve. And luckily, I was awarded the MIT Open Documentary Fellowship along with Black Public Media. And I went through a whole year of just learning about interactive media and learning from different scholars who are doing this type of work. These are some images of some of the kids we had try out our prototype of the app, where they were going around the community with their different iPads we gave them. And it was a living, walking history. We called it a digital scavenger hunt, and they were on different teams. And we gave them this map. So anywhere there's an X, there's a history point. So they could take their cell phone or iPad and learn about the history of these different spaces. And there was questionnaires and whatnot. And at the end, we gave the winning team a prize, whoever had the most questions correct. So they were able to go through their town. And this area here, Quakertown, this was a thriving Black community in like the late 1800s, but by 1922, 23, about 100 years ago, the residents were forced off their land, and they were forced to move here to the southeast part of town. So here's where Quakertown used to reside. Up north, there's there at the time it was university, but now it's called Texas Women's University. They didn't like the white women walking through the Black community to get to the center. So they made all the Black people leave, and the few people that fought, they were threatened by the KKK. There was one individual who tried to sue the city. He didn't want to leave, but they basically threatened him and said, we'll kill your baby girl if you stay. So in the middle of the night, they put their houses on logs carried by horses, and they had to roll their houses down the street to Southeast Denton. So I interviewed descendants of Quakertown and also residents of Southeast Denton who they have their own history as well, and this became part of that documentary. A resident of Southeast Denton, we heard a little bit of her interview, and I'll play just the beginning in a second, but this is Marjorie Young, and we interviewed her about her late husband, and there's a park named after him, and he did a lot of work in the community. He was a Vietnam vet, and we asked her, again, working with students, we asked her, what do you want children to know about your husband? And her response has also became a defining voice in the work that I'm doing now, in terms of what she wants to make sure people knew. And I'll just play the beginning so you can kind of preface what she's trying to say.
And I also just wanted the children to know that this man, my husband,
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, the audio's so weird here.
Carl Gene Young Sr., he was and still is the love of my life. And for the children to know that when you get married, you are getting married from death do us part, and that's what it should be. I was married to my husband for 37 years, and I had always hoped that we would be together for 50 because I always wanted that golden anniversary, but it wasn't in the plan. And I just want you to know that I love this man, and I always will.
So when we did this interview, I had students with me. Some of them were crying, and just it was really emotional. And what struck me about this, anytime I talk about my work, I always show this clip because this is a story that's not going to be in history books. It's not going to be in the newspapers, but it's valid. She wanted to make sure, you heard her say, I want the children to know that I love this man. So what I'm creating is trying to find a space where these stories can go, these images. So it's not just about segregation or civil rights movement, and it's not just about dogs and getting hosed off. Like there's so much more to Black history that's not getting that you don't see out there. So I'm trying to create that space. So the thing with this archive is that it's ongoing. So what I'm creating is a digital archive where it can be user generated along with students working with different teachers and educators to help add these stories to the map. There's a mobile option, but it's also in-person screenings and workshops that are a big part of this process. And it's going to be built out on an app that's in the process of getting created. But more importantly, it's a space for these stories where you can go ask someone, what do you want kids to know? And they can tell you based from their perspective. So it's not a right or wrong, but it's just something that needs to be added to our history. And it's a part of our history. Love is a part of our history. But if you were to just watch the Black Voices, the stories on Netflix, you wouldn't know that.
And I also,
sorry, I didn't want, okay, there we go. So now this goes to where I'm at now currently with Mapping Blackness. So again, creating this living archive, digital archive of Black communities that's intergenerational. Youth are still a huge part of this project. I'll show you some footage in a moment where I had a group of high school students just Monday interviewing some residents of Okemah. A big thing, again, back to these words: celebrate, preserve, document, inspire, educate, move to action. Those are some of the key words that are on my little board above my desk at home that are a big part of this project. So the images, the videos, the photographs that are added to this digital map, that's what I want people to come away with. After they view these stories, I don't want them to come away hopeless and traumatized and sad. I want them to know the history, but also know that there's hope, that to inspire them to want to instill change in their communities. And some of the kids I've worked with in the past have told me working on this documentary has made me want to run for student government and know that I can make a difference and enact change. I've included mixed realities like AR and VR, again, because this is also a way to engage with young people who are always on their phones. My daughter walks around the house with her cell phone. She's trying to watch all 30 seasons of The Simpsons. So she's always just watching. But I'm like, what if I can put history in her hand and she can see these videos on her phone? So there's multiple ways to interact with this in this digital archive. So the archives aren't locked away in libraries. And I know even myself as a professor, I'm like intimidated by archives. Like, I don't know how to get to them or how to find them. And luckily I've met some great librarians along the way, but I'm trying to make it so that these stories are accessible to all ages and all walks of life. At the heart of it, these are community-generated narratives about local heroes. So a few things. Also, I'll ask participants, what do they want the children to know? But also, who are those local heroes? What are those communal spaces that you want to be remembered? So I'm in the process of recreating some of these communities using 3D models. I'll show you in a second. A mix of oral histories, documentary footage, photographs, whatever we can take to preserve these communities, we can add this to the archive. In this video, here we go. So we have Miss Alma Clark in in Southeast Denton. So here's a recreation of the home that was built in
And this home was also in
1905.
Quakertown. It was built in about 1905. And if any of you are familiar with the Quakertown Park and know where the swimming pool is, this house was in the vicinity of the city swimming pool. And it was on the street that was named Terry.
So if you can't go to the actual, well, in the Quakertown Park, again, it no longer exists. Right now, it's just an open park. So we were able to take this house, and I'm working with a really great 3D designer who recreated this house, and he's in the process of recreating buildings in different communities across the US. So each community I go to, I ask them, what are those important buildings that you want to be preserved or commemorated, along with the important people. So we have her talking about it. So if you're on the app, you can click on that house and hear her talking about the history of this house, of the people that live there. So these are just a few other visuals. We recreated St. James AME Church. So here's a photograph, and here's a 3D model. Also, Fred Moore High School, which was the segregated high school at the time. And then we recreated this. So these buildings, so regardless of what happens to the neighborhood, at least we have something to preserve them where you can still know what they look like and interact with them in a 3D world we're using Unity and a few other applications. And then right now I'm in the process, I don't know if he's here, but I'm working with a really great UX UI designer to basically work out the workflow and what the user experience and the user interface will be for this application. So we have the model where it's, you know, the interactive map, which I'll show you the prototype. I think it's the next slide in a minute, but where you can basically interact with the map. You can zoom in and zoom out. So think about a few apps like Airbnb or even like just Google Maps, where you can just kind of choose where you want to focus at, and then you'll see different map points where you can click and see about the church or the school or whatnot. So with this project, I'm using technology as a tool. Right now, I see that it's really easy to use technology as a gimmick or a trend because, oh, you know, AI and VR and all that stuff sounds really cool, but I'm trying to use it as a tool to help to preserve these stories. So especially for the houses that don't exist anymore, we're using this tech as a way to bring these houses and stories to life using different mixed realities, 360 video, 3D design. But at the end of the day, it's still very much youth driven and youth created. So it's for, you know, young people to interact with, but it's also created by youth. There's also, you know, a web version that's getting created as well. So this, for this portion of the digital archive, there's a search feature where you can just type in Great Migration and you hear all the stories of migration. One thing I've noticed, because now I've done multiple communities, there's always that migration story. How did your family get here? And what's interesting, you know, whether it's a community in Ohio or Texas or Oklahoma, there's certain commonalities in that story. My family came from Alabama in 1942, or, you know, there's different overlaps. So there's a search feature where you can see all the great migration stories or all the stories about segregation or churches, and you can see those in different points on the map. And then just those important spaces being recreated. And then at the end of the day, it's still that communal aspect, because these stories are all tied together, whether you're in one state or another. And then, so these are just more the visuals. There's a social media feature within it. So user generated content, you can scroll and see who's making, who's telling stories in your community. You can click on the map. There's an AR and VR view. And then there's also a way to view the videos, the video snippets that are being shown. And there's no audio, but this is just like kind of how it'll work when you sign in. So we're still in the finishing up the prototyping phase and getting to that level while we're continuing to reach out to communities and whatnot. So that's just part of it. You can do your search, click on different information, walk around in the church, kind of go to different hotspots where more information will come up, or the video about the church will pop up. That's that. A little bit of history. And it's a little laggy for some reason. I think I'm going to click to the next one. I don't know why. Okay. Oh, this is one. I love this slide. So this brings it back to Top Gun and just that feeling of movie star. So this past fall, I had the honor. I was able to interview Dr. Pete. Where are you? So you're still here. Great. So we were able to interview a few residents, former residents of Okemah, and get their story. And again, it goes back to that feeling of wanting to make sure that important leaders in communities are honored and celebrated and treated like movie stars, basically. We are able to hear about their stories of migration. We're in the process of recreating some of those buildings that are important to Okemah, such as Willow Grove Baptist Church. This past Monday, I interviewed a few more residents. We're compiling what those buildings will look like and what needs to be created. But these are just a few of the women I was able to interview so far. And then this will be, you can see some of the visuals. So this was this past Monday.
I think Mapping Blackness really gives us an opportunity to sort of create a sense of what was there. This whole project really is, I think, a godsend because it'll help us tell our story, but give a sense of what it was really like with verbal remembrances as well as, sort of recreating the neighborhood digitally, if you will. I think there's an opportunity to kind of recreate some of the environments that we grew up in, so people get a sense of what it was like.
So we filmed this, like I said, this past Monday. So this is just the raw footage. It wasn't edited or anything, but this was a group of high school students at ASU Prep who did the interviews, asked the questions. They had a few guiding questions, but they were able then to ask more questions based on their interest. So the responses were really interesting from the two individuals we interviewed. And again, you had a different type of response when you asked someone, what do you want young people to know about your community? Again, there were more responses about hope in the future and just being involved in their communities. And then just a few more. And this goes back to Mr. Curry. In his video, he also answered the question, what do you want the children to know? And he spoke about he wants them to be more civically engaged. In this neighborhood, they have trustees, and he used to be a trustee of the community for years and years. And right now they have no Black representation. So you have no one making decisions about this community that look like him. And then I'm gonna go to this one. And to kind of hit home in terms of the urgency and the relevance of this type of work, we are, I feel that we're losing a generation of these storytellers. Again, just in the last few years, these are just some of the people that we've lost and that have been a part of this project. So again, that ongoing grief, but also a motivation in terms of now, we have their stories and it's important to go get more and to document and make sure we're preserving them. A lot of these families, when it's been a heavy weight, because for example, when Mr. White, he just passed a few months ago, his daughter called me asking for pictures. Sometimes I'll have the last photographs or videos of some of the people who've been gracious enough to allow us to interview them and be a part of this work. And that's a heavy weight for me. So that's why I wanted to make sure I created something where these images are accessible to anyone that wants them. So that's again, another important reason to have a digital archive that's open to the public, so that anyone can have these images, can hear these stories, and it's not on a hard drive in my office or whatnot. So that's more inspiration and motivation to keep doing this work. And then this was a Christmas card my dad gave me. He passed away in '96, but this is a card he gave me Christmas of '94. And him and my mom, they're one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about Black history. They made sure, and they were adamant about making sure we knew our history and we knew the importance of it. And this card is something that I think about with this work that I'm doing in terms of documenting communities across the whole US, in terms of how we as a people were all intertwined to form a pattern of life, and each thread plays its part in its tapestry. We must support each other. I'm here if you need me. So this card really rings true for even this type of work. I feel that we're all interconnected. So even in this space, there's a lot of memory keepers and storytellers and archivists and librarians all doing similar but different work. But I feel that we're all connected and supporting one another. I've already gone to a few people in this room that have already helped me with this work. And I'm always trying to lend myself to see how I can also support the work that you guys are doing. So I love the idea of collaborating and working together and not acting like we're all like, you know, this is my domain, this is my project, but seeing how we can help one another is really important. I love how Kima, like they have a documentary out, they have the book, but I'm also like, how can I help you as well? Can I recreate these buildings? Can I help tell your stories? Can I, whatever I can do where it's not in competition is really important. And that's what this card kind of takes me back to. And to just kind of for some lasting notes, and I'm going to go back to this and ask you now as the audience, what do you want children to know, whether it's about your community, about Black history, about your area of specialty, and what do you want the future generations to know? Are you creating work where that is accessible to the youth? So what if it's an archive, how can a 15-year-old get to that archive and learn about that history? If it's an oral history, how can they get to that story? And are they going to listen to, you know, the 60-minute oral history in its entirety? And how are you going to get it to them so they can learn that history? What do you want them to feel? So whatever work that you're going out there and creating, what do you want young people to feel, or all ages to feel? And think about what that youth perspective is. Again, that goes back to the importance and why I think there's so much value in having youth do this type of work. And there's been a few other projects that talk about the importance of youth and just, you know, creating that feeling of joy and hope and liberation, and think about how do you want to pass the baton to them to continue this work. Those are just a few of my lasting thoughts and words, but more so to turn it to you and everyone in this room. What do you want these kids to know, and how can we work together to do it?
Does anybody want to answer Carla's question? Todd, okay.
Sorry, I talked too much. What I thought about when you were speaking was, you know, we're nuanced, just like everybody else. Black people are nuanced. We're not all basketball players. We're not all rappers. We're not all Rosa Parks. We're not all Martin Luther King. We're nuanced. And for me, there's like interesting stories out there of nuanced people that weren't perfect, but they're interesting. And for instance, for us in our archives, a couple of years ago, we came across there was a jar of letters found in a wall down south from a World War II vet. They're love letters. And, you know, we gushed over finding them because they're from way back and they were hidden. And we got these letters and they're crumbling apart, and he's in his uniform and he's writing to his girl, like, oh, baby, she lived in Tucson, you know. But then, you know, the more you read it, you know, she was married to someone else. And all of these things, and he was in jail, like in California, and she was on the make, taken, you know, from him. And like, that's a nuanced story, you know, in a world also where people go to plantation tours and don't want to hear about the slaves. You know, there's segregation of even curiosity regarding our stories, you know, and also in a world where we grew up, most of us are of age, you know, our first Black history piece was being shown an African with a bone through his nose in class, and then straight to Martin Luther King and then on. So it's centered around kind of being that embarrassment in class too.
And it's still like that. Yeah, that's still what they're teaching. Yep.
Right. So am I answering the question? Am I asking a question? Moving on.
No, thank you for sharing. Thank you.
We do have some questions online. We are getting close to the end of Carla's time, and we do have 1 to 2 questions online. So if Carla, if you're okay with moving on to Q&A, just so we can get a couple of these questions answered before we have to wrap up Carla's time. So I'm gonna have Shannon.
Okay, I'm gonna blend them into sort of one question with 2 parts. How were you able to do this work as a mom, especially after having your most recent baby? And how did you stay encouraged in the face of so many communities, buildings, et cetera, that no longer exist?
Those are great questions. So being a mom, for one, like I did take that, I took a break and I know when, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a balancing act, but when it comes back to it, just my kids motivate me because I'm also doing this for them. So that's that internal motivation. Like I want them to know this history just as importantly. And then what was the other question?
Staying courage in the face of so many.
I guess just that sense of urgency and wanting to make sure we still capture that history so people know what once was there, so that if someone walks down the street where Okima was, they can still know, okay, you can pull out your phone and see this used to be homes, this used to be a community. So that is what motivates me, to make sure people know they're not just walking down these streets not knowing the history. Yeah.
Excellent. I think we have, we have time for one more question. Does anybody, okay, you raised your hands first, I saw you. So we do have people online, so we want to make sure that our online folks can hear you as well.
So my question to you, Carla, is I'm Kiana Maria Sears. How well has the Mesa community embraced you, because saying that the new school is in Mesa, and how much work have you done in the very place where you are in Mesa? Because I do know we have a Mesa historian here as well.
So that's a great question. So I'm still relatively new to not only Arizona, but the Mesa building just opened this past fall. So I'm still trying to get to know people and build relationships. I've had the fortune of meeting Bruce and seeing some of his amazing work that's in our building, the portraits of the matriarchs of Mesa, but I'm still at that point of just researching, reaching out, and still trying to learn the community before I jump in and just kind of, I guess the goal of any of my work, I don't go into communities to take over and tell them what stories to tell, but more trying to find the right individuals to see what stories do y'all want to tell and how can I help that? So I'm just, one day at a time. So hopefully just through, work, knowing more about Bruce and just some of the people he's introduced me to, it's just about that relationship building. Yeah. Good question.
Okay. Due to time, we're going to go ahead and wrap up Carla's keynote. Carla, as always, thank you so very much. Really appreciate you. And I'm sure Carla will be able to share any contact information if you would like to learn more about the project that she's doing. In general, if you'd like to learn more, please reach out to me. I'm more than willing, if Carla is willing, to share her contact information about the work she's doing. So yes, oh, there it is. So that's her email address. So please reach out to Carla if you would like to learn more about her production company and her work and the work that she's doing, not only here at ASU, but around the country in order to preserve Black and African-American stories. So thank you, Carla. Thank you all. We really appreciate you. And we'll be back.